Welcome back. You're watching live from Paris on France 24. The headlines this hour. The list of countries where the coronavirus is present passes 60, with Saudi Arabia, Senegal and Indonesia all confirming their first cases. This is a third person dies from the disease here in France. Israelis head to the polls for the third time in under a year, with turnout at a 20-year high. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and challenger Benny Gantz each hoping that this time they'll win enough seats to form a coalition. And thousands of Syrian refugees try to cross into Greece as Turkey abruptly opens the border. President Erdogan says he will no longer abide by an EU deal to stop migrants from leaving. First, the list of countries reporting cases of the coronavirus has passed 60. Senegal, Saudi Arabia, Iceland and Indonesia have all confirmed their first cases, while more than 3,000 people have died from the disease worldwide. The World Health Organization says the virus has brought the world into uncharted territory. Catherine Viet reports.
Governments are stepping up measures meant to slow the spread of the coronavirus. In South Korea, which has the largest number of cases outside China, government officials have decided to postpone reopening the schools on March 9th.
The next 2 weeks are really important to curbing the spread of coronavirus infections. At least one more week is essential to ensure a safe environment for our students.
The South Korean army has been called into service as it disinfects streets in the city of Daegu. In Europe, Italy remains the country with the most cases. U.S. airlines Delta and American have announced they're suspending flights to Milan until May. Germany has confirmed an increase in the number of infected, with German health officials saying the risk of contracting the virus is now moderate. Meanwhile, EU officials say there are over 2,100 cases in 18 member states.
ECDC has announced today that the risk level has risen from moderate to high for people in the European Union. In other words, the virus continues to spread.
Iran remains the country with the highest death rate outside of China. One high-profile casualty, a member of the council that advises the country's supreme leader. The one bright spot is China, which has reported a big fall in the number of new cases at the center of the epidemic. But the virus has still spread to more than 60 countries. Portugal, Iceland, and Indonesia have announced their first cases of the virus, as Thailand, Australia, and the U.S. reported their first fatalities.
Well, here in France, there's been a third death from the virus. The elderly victim, a woman, came from the same town as the 60-year-old teacher who died last week. There are 191 confirmed cases here in France where mass public gatherings have been banned. The Paris Book Fair has been cancelled and the Louvre Museum remains shut. Charlie James has more.
The coronavirus has now spread to at least a dozen regions in France, and particularly hard-hit departments are implementing strict measures to try and contain infections. Northeastern Oise County has shut down some schools until mid-March. Markets there have also been forced to pack up. Further south in Bordeaux, France's prime minister visited a hospital Monday and asked for all citizens to play a role.
To combat the circulation of the virus with full efficiency, I call on every French person to be active in this fight. The first thing, which is simple but essential, is to wash your hands with soap every hour and meticulously.
A rise in COVID-19 cases has also been counted in the southeastern area of Haute-Savoie, Brittany in the west, and in the Île-de-France region, home to the French capital. Health officials in Brittany are also placing constraints on the public.
Following the example of what has been done in Oise, as in Haute-Savoie, gatherings in a closed place are forbidden, and mass gatherings are forbidden so that we can avoid the rapid spread of the virus.
Meanwhile, in Paris, the world-famous Louvre Museum remains closed Monday. Its employees are refusing to work out of fears of contracting the virus from visitors. And the Paris Book Fair, scheduled to take place later this month, has been canceled. With cases expected to increase, President Emmanuel Macron has canceled 2 of his events this week in order to be available to respond to the outbreak.
Now, polls have just closed in Israel following the third election there in under a year. The exit polls are putting Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party ahead of Benny Gantz's Blue and White party, but those results are not confirmed, and it's not yet clear if Netanyahu and his allies have the 61 seats needed to form a government. Turnout this time around has been at more than 56%. That is the highest level in an Israeli election in 20 years. And remember, whatever the result tonight, Netanyahu is due in court on March 17th, where he will face trial on charges of corruption. Selena Sykes has the story.
A third election in a year in a bid to break Israel's political deadlock. With complaints of voter fatigue and opinion polls predicting the latest round is too close to call, many fear it will be just as inconclusive. Benjamin Netanyahu is running the country as interim leader, with Israelis heading to the polls just 2 weeks before he is due to stand trial on a series of corruption charges. This election is a fight for his political survival. Netanyahu has denied all allegations, arguing he is the victim of a politically motivated witch hunt. Despite opponents calling on him to step down, Israel's longest-serving prime minister has managed to hold on to the loyalty of his right-wing Likud party, winning a landslide victory in a leadership election in December. He's now depending on the support of several smaller right-wing parties and the turnout of his core nationalistic voters, after announcing he will move ahead with a controversial plan to build settlements east of Jerusalem.
Go vote. Go vote. It's a proud day. This is a democracy. You have a great right that you should exercise with confidence.
His main opponent, Benny Gantz, is hoping to be lucky a third time round. Victory for his centrist Blue and White party would end more than 10 years of Likud in government. He's calling on voters to put an end to Netanyahu's reign, calling it a hate crime against democracy.
I call on the public in Israel to go out and vote in masses, each person according to what their heart tells them and according to their own perceptions.
With neither Netanyahu nor Gantz likely to win an outright majority, the right-wing nationalist Avigdor Lieberman looks poised to become kingmaker once again. He refused to back either candidate in the last round of elections in April.
Well, our international affairs editor Robert Parsons is here with me in the studio. Rob, Rob, bear with me. I'm going to come to you in just 1 second because I'm just hearing that we can now go live to Jerusalem. Iris Makler is there for us. Iris, we are getting these exit poll results which show a pretty big win for Netanyahu. Is that right?
Yes, it is right. That's what we're seeing. That's what the exit polls are saying. Still, despite this large win and despite the fact that we saw the left wing tumble on these exit polls, there is no it's not a clear majority. It's not yet the 61 Netanyahu needs with that right-wing bloc. He'll have 60 votes. That's the same position he was in back in April, nearly a year ago now, in April 2019. And then he wasn't able to get one politician from another party to come across to desert and give him the 61 he needs to rule. So it is a victory, but I think we have to wait to see the scale of the victory and to see if Netanyahu actually will have a majority.
So once again, I'm guessing everything depends on Avigdor Lieberman. It looks as though his Yisrael Beiteinu party has picked up 6 votes. Is that right?
6 on one exit poll, 8 on another. So yes, he is once again the kingmaker, but there have been now 2 elections when the kingmaker didn't choose a king. So what will happen if Avigdor Lieberman chooses not to choose once more? Will Israel be thrown on 4th elections? Everyone here seems to say that's untenable and unlikely, but then who would have believed there could be 3rd elections? And the Israeli system, which never foresaw a situation like this, doesn't prevent any number of elections. We could have 4th, 5th or 6th elections by law, and there's nothing to stop that.
Elections could go on forever. What a scenario. But looking at the arithmetic, Iris, it looks as though it would be impossible for Benny Gantz and the Blue and White Party to form a majority as well. They've got 33, which is less than they had last time around.
That's right. So they fell a little. The Likud gained quite a lot on the exit polls that I've seen. And what that means is that they didn't fall so much, but the other left-wing parties really fell. So when you look at their bloc is 52, ish, 51, 53, but Netanyahu's bloc is 60 or 59. And that's why even if Avigdor Lieberman came along and said to Benny Gantz, to the Blue and White Party, I'll come with you, they still only have 60. They still can only match the Likud. They can't outdo them, outperform them on the current exit polls.
And I guess the other major takeaway from this is that Likud supporters are not particularly bothered by the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu is due in court in a couple of weeks on corruption charges.
That's exactly right. His supporters support him no matter what. They are very impressed by Israel's economic situation. They are very impressed by him as a statesman. They're also relieved that none of the diplomatic and international crises in all of Israel's neighbouring countries have affected them. So I think they say, it seems, that they are loyal to him even if he has to face these corruption charges, which he will do, starting in 2 weeks' time.
And just a quick word, Iris, before you go on, the joint list. This is the Arab-Israeli parties. They seem to have done well.
Very well. They've increased their vote. They're the only people, I think, in the bloc that Benny Gantz, the centrist party, the centrist Blue and White Party heads, they're the only party that's increased their vote. And it is very interesting. They're now the third largest party in the parliament. And I think it was partly because of Netanyahu's stand against them. It's partly also because of Trump's deal of the century and the proposal to move them over to the Palestinian Authority. They didn't like that, and so they came out to vote. And I have also seen, interestingly, that a number of Jewish Israelis, surprisingly, were also voting for them. So altogether, it's an endorsement of them as well.
Iris, thank you very much. Iris Makler there in Jerusalem as those results trickle in. Rob Parsons is here with some analysis on what is happening there. So it would appear that Netanyahu has done well, even though that corruption case is literally just 2 weeks away. Can we say that Donald Trump's peace plan proposal helped him here?
I don't know. I think, a number of things at play here. My own feeling is that probably it didn't help an awful lot. Both sides supported Donald Trump's peace plan. Certainly, Netanyahu would have squeezed more out of them than Benny Gantz. But on issues of foreign policy, diplomacy, the occupation, things like that, there's very little to split Benny Gantz's blue and white from Likud and Netanyahu. I mean, a couple of interesting things, I think, that despite the fact that this is the third general election in Israel inside a year, the turnout was remarkably high, creeping up to 70% by the end of the night. That will be the highest since 1999. We still have a long way to go, I think, before this is finally settled. It is an exit poll, after all. We don't know that quite. We've seen many cases of exit polls getting it disastrously wrong in the past.
In Israel, aren't they?
So it could change. I think it probably will stay something like this, that Likud will come out on top, and then the bargaining will start. Israel Beitenu has. And Lieberman, the leader, have said in the past few months that the possibility of doing a deal with Benjamin Netanyahu is close to zero. There's a pretty toxic relationship between the two, so there'd have to be some hard bargaining if they were to come over to the bloc and give Netanyahu the 61 seats he needs to get a majority in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. But on the other hand, the pressure will be mounting if Netanyahu's bloc is getting close to that magic 61, because with pressure coming on the economy, despite the fact that the economy is doing well, the budget still hasn't been settled on. There are all kinds of little crises going on and big ones forming, like the coronavirus and how you deal with it, for instance. People will be saying, look, this is a time when we need strong government, and it's up to all politicians to put aside their differences in the interests of that. There will be a lot of that going on in the background, putting pressure on people to come to a deal with Netanyahu if he gets close to the 61.
Rob, thank you very much indeed. Rob Parsons there. Now, European leaders have accused Turkey's president of blackmail after he opened the border to thousands of Syrian refugees. Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that he would no longer enforce a 4-year-old deal with the EU to prevent migrants from leaving. And Greece claims to have stopped 10,000 people from crossing its land borders within the past 24 hours alone. Peter O'Brien has this report.
First, some warning shots. Then the Greek Coast Guard tries another tactic to push a dinghy full of people back to Turkey. Since Sunday morning, more than 1,000 migrants have landed on Greek islands. And after Turkey lifted border restrictions on Thursday, more than 10,000 have reached the land borders with Greece and Bulgaria. President Erdogan wants the EU to take on more of a share of refugees.
The number of those who've headed to Europe has reached hundreds of thousands. There will be more. Soon, this number will be in the millions.
Accusing Turkey of deliberately driving migrants across the border, Greece has suspended all asylum applications for a month. Top EU officials will head to Greece on Tuesday.
Turkey is in a difficult situation concerning with regards to the refugees and the migrants. But what we see now cannot be an answer or a solution.
Under a 2016 deal, Turkey's meant to stop the flow of migrants to the EU in exchange for billions of euros. Turkey now hosts some 4 million refugees, most of whom are Syrian, and another million or so is heading there after the latest fighting in Idlib province. President Erdogan says the EU's aid has been slow to come, but Angela Merkel says more than 3 billion euros have been paid out, and she expects Erdogan to uphold the deal.
Well, meanwhile, Syrian aid workers are calling for a no-fly zone over Idlib province. The head of Syria's White Helmet says that the Assad regime is carrying out systematic strikes on hospitals, schools and other civilian targets. Nearly 1 million refugees have fled Idlib towards Turkey since December. Tensions are rising between Syria and Turkey, with Turkey shooting down 2 government jets at the weekend. This in retaliation for Syrian forces killing 34 Turkish soldiers last week. France 24's Shona Bhattacharya is in Hatay near that border.
It looks like Russia is narrowing that window of military opportunity, so to speak, that it has allowed Turkey over the past few days. This Monday, the Syrian regime retook the town of Sarakeb on the strategic M5 highway with the help of Russian aircraft. And in fact, after that town was retaken by Syrian government forces, Russia deployed military police in the town to make sure that Turkish forces do not attack it in the future, as Turkey has said that it does not want to provoke a face-off directly with Russia. Russia that has beefed up its military presence in the region with 2 warships in the eastern Mediterranean arriving in the last few days, as well as additional fighter jets on its military base in Latakia. And finally, in the last 24 hours or so, Turkish airplanes and drones have been absent from Syrian skies. That comes after, of course, Syria closed off its airspace in northwest Syria, but also after Russia said that it can no longer guarantee that Turkish aircrafts would not be attacked and that they would stay safe. It does seem that Russia has tied Turkish hands in Idlib as we speak. We'll see how the negotiations pan out between Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Moscow on Thursday.
Shona Bhattacharya there reporting from the border between Turkey and Syria. Well, moving to the US now, where a second centrist has quit the race for the Democratic Party nomination. Senator Amy Klobuchar ended her campaign and endorsed rival Joe Biden in what's seen as an attempt to unify moderate voters behind the former vice president. It comes a day after fellow moderate Pete Buttigieg, the first openly gay man to run for president, also quit the race. He too is endorsing Biden. Tomorrow, 14 states will hold primary contests on the decisive Super Tuesday contest. And we will, of course, have coverage of that for you here on France 24.